We're back with our Walk on Water study, and we're in week 8, and our theme this week is obedience. So that's not a word we like. I don't think Toto likes obedience either, but it's a very important word for our Christian walk because we want to walk in obedience. So let's get started. Open your book, and we're going to dive right into week 8 and start with our anchor verse, which is from Matthew 14:29, the second half. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. And so he stepped out of his comfort zone, out of the safety of the boat. And so day 1, we're going to talk about how sometimes God calls us out of our comfort zones. And do we go? And what do we need to maybe start doing, and what do we need to stop doing to walk in obedience to the Lord? Because when Peter stepped out of that boat, he was ushering in his own miracle. His obedience led to a miracle. Because when we think of the Walk on Water story, we usually think of Jesus. And we may forget that Peter walked on water too, but it was because he was obedient. And so what a great way to start our week of obedience. Day 2, we're going to be talking about Mary. And our verse is from Luke 1:34 through 38, and it's Mary's conversation with the angel when the angel appeared to her and said that she would be having a son, and it would not be any old son. It would be the Son of God. And she said, "How can this be? I'm a virgin." But it ends, the story says, "I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May your word to me be fulfilled." So it was an incredible act of obedience. And we have to remember that Mary was very young. Scholars say between 13 and 15 years old. Can you imagine getting this news that she's not only going to be carrying a son, even though she's a virgin, but it's the Son of God. And so sometimes God calls us to things that seem impossible or crazy. And how do we respond? Do we respond like Mary? Talk about crazy. We're moving on to day 3 and Noah. People thought he was crazy because he was building a boat, not just a boat, a huge ark. And there was not rain in the forecast. There was no rain around. But he was being obedient. That's why he did it. And because he was obedient, it protected his family and all the animals. So God was able to kind of do a restart on the world. But there was a ripple effect. It protected his family. And sometimes our steps of obedience or disobedience have a ripple effect onto those around us, often those closest to us. So we're going to be thinking about that on day 3, day 4, King Hezekiah. So if you've read the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, you can see a pattern where there are good kings and bad kings, and it often repeats. It says about King Hezekiah, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. So he is one of the sons of David, just like Solomon, who we've talked about before. And we read in 2 Kings 18:5 through 7 that he held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him, and he kept the commands the Lord had given Moses. And the Lord was with him, and he was successful in whatever he undertook. And then it says he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. And so the Assyrians were surrounding him. And because of Hezekiah's obedience, they were defeated. And so what a great story of obedience. We're also going to learn that King Hezekiah was a man of prayer. And so again, God protected him because of his obedience and showed him favor. And do we see that in our life? Do we see God's protection and favor because of our obedience? And so day 5 is going to be really difficult. And we've read this scripture before, Luke 22:41 through 44, because it's so important. And it's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane praying to his Father, "If you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." And so Jesus' obedience led him to the cross through suffering, through his crucifixion, and his ultimate death. It cost him his life, and our obedience will likely cost us something. There are martyrs all over the world, so there are people dying for their faith. And we may not be called to die for our faith, but to die, certain things in our life may have to die. Our wishes, our plans, our desires. So what is the cost of our obedience to following Jesus? And we're going to talk about that on day 5. And then day 6 is always a time to rest and reflect and take a step. I hope you go through the step process on page 111 and to really think about and what step of obedience can you take as a result of these lessons. And so that is a summary of our week on obedience. And then next week, we're moving on to focus. And this is definitely a week that challenges me, and I can totally relate to Peter getting distracted. And so he takes the steps out of the boat of faith, and then he looks around and gets distracted with the storms around him. So next week, tune in for focus. Have a great week. Bye-bye.